Sonic had pretty much steamrolled most of the competition at this point, so much so that Sonic 2 is still the best-selling Sonic game to date. As great as it was, Sega had a problem. Just how are you going to top it? Why, you make it bigger and better, of course. Sounds like a no-brainer. Sadly, it wasn't that easy. There wasn't enough memory in a standard Sega Genesis cartridge to craft the game that Sega originally intended to make. Because of that, a lot of content had to be cut. Despite this setback, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was released in February of 1994. Was that a bad move on Sega's part? Only time will tell. The game takes place directly after Sonic 2. The Death Eggers crash-landed on a place called Angel Island. Sonic and Tails go to investigate but are stopped in their tracks by Knuckles, and right away he gives a better first impression than Metal Sonic ever could. First of all, he knocks the Chaos Emeralds out of Super Sonic. As far as we knew, in Sonic 2, Super Sonic was supposed to be invincible, so we're already given an idea of just how strong Knuckles really is. Knuckles is an echidna that lives to protect the Master Emerald. His race mysteriously vanished one day, so he's the last of his kind. As such, he's very detached from the rest of society. The reason why he's stopping you in the first place is that Robotnik has convinced him that Sonic is his enemy. Given this is the first time he's interacted with somebody in God knows how many years, or ever for that matter, his alliance with Robotnik seems very believable. It's also very clear that Knuckles knows a lot more about the island than you do. He has hidden traps everywhere, and if he doesn't want to use those, he'll just blow you up outright. Again, I think Metal Sonic would have had much more of an impact on the player if he, did something other than kidnap Amy at the beginning of the game. The best part about these sections is that you feel completely helpless, because every time Knuckles shows up, he's always out of your reach, even when he's right in front of you. Just look at that sprite work. Sonic's sprite has now been updated to emphasize his personality even further. The rest of the game's graphics aren't too shabby either, like the ice chunks in the water and ice cap zone, or the Death Egg constantly watching you in the background of the launch base zone. It's overall much more detailed than anything in the previous games, Sonic CD included. Sonic 3 also feels a lot more cinematic than any other games in the classic series. You start out on Angel Island when suddenly the place gets swarmed by Robotnik and set on fire. As you go along the game, you'll have airships that will try to bomb you, walls that will close in on you, and you even get shot out of a cannon and snowboard down a mountain. That's another thing I like. At the end of each zone, you'll have a small cutscene of sorts to explain how Sonic and Tails get to the next zone. Thanks to this, Sonic 3 never loses steam when it comes to pacing, in my opinion. This also makes Sonic's world feel a lot bigger than it actually is. Even when transitioning between Act 1 and Act 2, you just keep on going. If that wasn't enough, Sega even added mini bosses in between each act. They're just as hard as any given boss from Sonic 1 or 2, being more of a warm-up for the actual boss. Speaking of bosses, this is such a big improvement over what we had previously. It's not so much their attacks, but figuring out how to hit them in the first place. For example, in the Hydra City fight, Robotnik will drop these bombs that spout out water. You can use those spouts, or you can stand on the whirlpools that Robotnik uses to trap you. Sounds pretty weird, but if you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. Tails returns as a playable character, only this time he can fly, meaning that he can find secrets that Sonic cannot. And holy hell have these levels gotten a lot bigger. There are several different pathways you can take. In fact, there are so many of them I guarantee you haven't seen them all. So wait, if Tails can fly, what makes Sonic so special? Well, that's where the Insta Shield comes in. By pressing the jump button while in midair, Sonic will have a shield that will surround him for a brief second. Doesn't seem like much, I know, but it gives Sonic much more range when attacking. Still not satisfied? Well, what about the elemental shields? If you recall in my Sonic 1 review, I stated that I didn't feel comfortable in calling the shield and the speed up shoes power-ups. Technically they are, but unlike the fire flower from Mario, it doesn't really add to your moveset. Whereas the elemental shields not only give you environmental advantages, like breathing underwater and deflecting small projectiles. If you're Sonic, you can use a fire dash with the flame shield, a bounce with the aqua shield, and a double jump with the thunder shield. Again, it's not much, but you'll be surprised how often these extra abilities come in handy. One aspect I hated from every Sonic game so far is the special stages. If it didn't require memorization, they were hindered by overall sluggish performance. Not to mention that you have to make an effort to keep your rings in order to get to them. With that said, how does Sonic 3 handle it? For starters, you need to find giant rings hidden in the levels. Then you'll be taken directly to a special stage. Yes, this is more like it. Sega linked getting the Chaos Emeralds into exploring the level. This is a brilliant idea, and it adds to the feeling of self-discovery, while leaving so much more for the player to find. And unlike the robot generators in Sonic CD, these can usually be found in the given pathway you're running on. The best part is that Blue Sphere is one of the best Sonic special stages to date. You need to collect blue spheres and avoid the red ones. At the same time, the stage will be constantly speeding up, making it significantly harder. To make life easier for yourself, you can circle around a group of blue spheres, turning them into rings. Collect every ring in the special stage and you get a perfect, which gives you a ton of points. Collect all the blue spheres and you'll be rewarded with a Chaos Emerald. I love these special stages. They rely more on reflexes than memorization, and for a Sonic game I wouldn't have it any other way. That, and I feel that there's a better sense of satisfaction when completing them. So what's your incentive for keeping your rings? 2 words. Bonus stages. You enter them the same way you would enter a special stage in Sonic 2, only this time you only have to have a minimum of 20 rings. Bonus stages can help you get rings, 1-ups as well as elemental shields, so they're definitely worth the effort. Despite how big the levels are, Sonic 3 just feels really short. There are only 6 zones, the same amount as the first game, and there are pathways that neither Sonic nor Tails can get to. I think it's time we talk about Sonic and Knuckles. As stated earlier, Sega's original vision did not see the light of day. Some of the cut content can be found in the level select of Sonic 3, if you can actually access it in the first place. Some of these levels include Mushroom Hill, Flying Battery and Sandopolis. Sega, not being one to quit, created the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge, released just a few months after Sonic 3. Is this just a cheap cash-in? Well, we'll see. The game continues on from Sonic 3. The Death Egg's launch has been stopped, causing it to crash land once again. Meanwhile, Sonic is trying to hunt down Robotnik, with Knuckles still getting in his way. If you're wondering where Tails is, he's probably on a coffee break or something. When you reach the hidden palace zone, you square off against Knuckles. After beating him, you find out that Robotnik tricked Knuckles so he can steal the Master Emerald, the jewel that keeps the island afloat. From there, Knuckles escorts you to a secret passage leading to the Sky Sanctuary Zone, where you board the Death Egg, retrieving the Master Emerald, and finally turning the Death Egg into space junk. If there's one thing I can say that's good about both Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles, is that they're both good at storytelling. In Lava Reef Zone, we see the Death Egg reactivate. Presumably, these robots are looking for fuel to power it. How about here, where you see the final boss being foreshadowed on the walls of Hidden Palace? All of the act zones from Sonic 3 are here and accounted for, along with a few new ones. Being a continuation of Sonic 3, Sonic & Knuckles is undoubtedly harder than its predecessor, as it should be. Sonic has all his abilities he had in Sonic 3, so you know what to expect here. The real star of the show is the new porcupine on the block with a buff chest, Knuckles the Echidna, who can glide and climb walls. He can't jump as high as Sonic though, so take that into consideration. But of course, I know what you all want me to talk about, so I might as well talk about it now. Sonic & Knuckles is a one-of-a-kind cartridge in that it came with a flip top that would give you extra content to other Sonic games if they were placed on top. If Sonic 2 was plugged in, you get to play as Knuckles in Sonic 2. You can't do that for Sonic 1 though. It had something to do with the colour palette of Sonic 1 not being compatible with Knuckles' sprite, but future revisions and ROM hacks have proved Sega wrong. However, the magic truly happens when you connect Sonic 3 to Sonic & Knuckles, creating what is considered by many to be the greatest Sonic game of all time, Sonic 3 & Knuckles. The game contains all of the zones from Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles, creating one large narrative. Knuckles can now be played in the Sonic 3 levels, meaning that you can access all those pathways that were impossible to get to otherwise, giving Knuckles his own unique adventure. Knuckles' story takes place after Sonic's story. You wanna know how I know? Angel Island is clearly not in the sea, and the absence of water in the Carnival Night Zone further supports this. Second, the tower that Knuckles destroyed in Sonic's story is still a pile of rubble. And finally, the capsule holding the ghosts in Sandopolis has already been destroyed. I love the attention to detail detail here. When you get to the Sonic and Knuckles section of the game, you'll come across Knuckles, who's clearly trying to hide something. That being a multicoloured ring. If you jump into it, you lose your Chaos Emeralds, but to compensate, you can transform them into Super Emeralds when you beat a second set of special stages. You now have the ability to transform into your Hyper form. Hypersonic is even faster than Supersonic, but he can also breathe underwater and jump dash that kills every enemy on the screen. Knuckles also does something similar, creating an earthquake when climbing on the wall. What does Tails get, you may ask? He gets a super form where Flickies surround him and do all the work for him. Better yet, you have to press the jump button twice in order to transform, so for me it doesn't cheapen the experience like last time. Even if they did, the levels have many more layers to them, so I find myself running out of rings much more often. Can we just take a second to talk about the soundtrack? It's debatably my favourite in the entire series. Every track, whether it be the second act of Hydro City or even the chilling sounds of the final boss, no track falls flat. Yes, some of the songs were composed by Michael Jackson. Apparently he wasn't happy with the quality of the music, so he wanted to go uncredited. Funny thing, the credits music in the standalone Sonic 3 would later become the song Stranger in Moscow. This game feels great, but that doesn't mean it's free of any shortcomings. Sonic 3 may drag for some. Granted, you have a save feature, but the point still remains that some levels can go on forever. I'm looking at Act 2 of Carnival Night and Standopolis respectively. This is probably the only time in any Sonic game that you could potentially hit the 10-minute time limit. That should not happen. I shouldn't have to learn all the best routes in order to have a chance of beating it in time. I also wish that Knuckles' story did more to separate itself from Sonic's story. It revolves around a single egg robo that escaped from the Sky Sanctuary, who comes back to bring Knuckles to Mecha Sonic, a robot who you think is destroyed in Sonic's story, but you don't actually see that. Again, attention to detail. I will say that Knuckles' final boss is one of the best we've seen in the series, but seriously, you're telling me that Egg Robo attacks the island in the exact same fashion as Robotnik? Come on, I'm not expecting all new bosses, but I want to see more of the greenery of Angel Island. It would have been nice for Knuckles to have his own bosses, but I understand why he doesn't, and hey, Marble Garden has its own original boss. While we're on this subject, for some unknown reason, the Big Arm boss fight was taken out of Sonic's story in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and I don't know why. It's a fun time. It appeared in basic Sonic 3, so why not Sonic 3 and Knuckles? My final issue that I have with Sonic 3 is not necessarily about the game itself, but more about how it's marketed in today's world. Both Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles provide enough content on their own to justify the double price tag in 1994. In present day, however, not so much. Sega wants us to acknowledge these two games as one, but I cannot understand why they keep re-releasing Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles as two separate games, other than plain greed. It's not the game's fault, I understand that, but when people tell me they consider Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles two separate games, while that may not be my opinion, I can't help but see where they're coming from. Regardless of such, I still consider Sonic 3 and Knuckles to be a fantastic game, and the true third installment in the classic Genesis trilogy. And after some careful consideration, I now consider it my favourite of the three, 4 if you count Sonic CD. Join me next time as we finally take a look at Sonic's first proper shift into the third dimension with Sonic Adventure for the Sega Dreamcast.